the Nemean Lion, the bulletproof beast. Hercules faced his first labor against a lion that was basically the ancient world's version of a living tank. This wasn't your average zoo cat. The Nemean Lion had a hide so tough that no weapon could pierce it. Swords bounced off like rubber balls, arrows shattered on contact, and spears simply refused to cooperate. The lion had been terrorizing the region of Nemea, devouring livestock and anyone brave enough to challenge it. King Eurystheus probably thought he was sending Hercules on a suicide mission. After all, if the greatest warriors of the time couldn't handle one oversized feline, what chance did this muscular troublemaker have? But Hercules was nothing if not creative under pressure. When his usual approach of hit it really hard failed miserably, he realized he needed to think outside the box. He cornered the beast in its cave, blocking one entrance while approaching through the other. The solution was beautifully simple and absolutely brutal. Since he couldn't cut through the lion's hide, Hercules decided to use good old-fashioned wrestling techniques. He grabbed the lion in a chokehold that would make any UFC fighter proud and literally squeezed the life out of it. The real genius move came next. Hercules used the lion's own claws to skin it, since they were the only things sharp enough to cut through that invincible hide. He wore the lion's pelt as armor for the rest of his adventures, turning his enemy's greatest strength into his own protection. Talk about recycling with style. The Lernaean Hydra, the growing nightmare. The second labor introduced Hercules to a creature that redefined the phrase, "two heads are better than one." The Lernaean Hydra was a serpentine monster with multiple heads. And here's the kicker. Whenever you cut off one head, two more would grow back in its place. It was like playing whack-a-mole, except the moles multiplied and wanted to eat your face. This oversized snake lived in the swamps near Lerna, poisoning the water and making life miserable for everyone in the area. Its breath was so toxic that even getting close to the thing could knock you out cold. The Hydra also had one immortal head right in the center, just to make things extra challenging. Hercules quickly discovered that his usual sword first, questions later approach was counterproductive. Every successful strike just made the problem twice as bad. The hero was literally creating more enemies with each swing of his blade. It was like the world's most dangerous math problem. Enter Iolaus, Hercules' nephew and the ancient world's best wingman. While Hercules chopped off heads, Iolaus would immediately cauterize the stumps with a burning torch, preventing new heads from sprouting. They turned monster fighting into a perfectly choreographed dance of destruction. For the immortal head, Hercules had to get creative again. He buried it under a massive boulder, essentially giving the Hydra's last head the world's most permanent timeout. Modern video games actually borrowed this regenerating enemy concept, proving that ancient myths still inspire today's boss battles. The Golden Hind of Artemis, the fastest chase ever. The third labor was like a high-stakes game of tag that lasted an entire year. Hercules had to capture the Golden Hind, a deer sacred to Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. This wasn't just any deer. It had golden horns, bronze hooves, and could run faster than any earthly creature. Think of it as the ancient world's Ferrari with antlers. The catch was that Hercules couldn't harm the animal, since doing so would earn him the wrath of Artemis herself. Getting on the bad side of a goddess known for turning people into deer and setting wild animals on them seemed like a poor life choice. The mission required finesse instead of brute force, not exactly Hercules' specialty. For an entire year, Hercules pursued this supernatural deer across Greece and beyond. The chase took him through forests, over mountains, and into lands where mortals rarely ventured. It was the ultimate test of endurance and patience for a hero more accustomed to solving problems with his fists. The pursuit finally ended when Hercules managed to pin the deer between two rivers, trapping it without causing harm. Some versions say he used a net. Others claim he caught it while it slept. Either way, the key was outsmarting the creature rather than overpowering it. When Artemis confronted Hercules about taking her sacred animal, he explained his situation with King Eurystheus and the labors imposed by the oracle. The goddess, impressed by his respect and restraint, allowed him to borrow the deer temporarily. It's always nice when divine beings are reasonable about their property. The Erymanthian boar, the king's worst fear. The fourth labor sent Hercules after a boar that had apparently been hitting the gym and taking anger management classes, except it only learned how to get angrier. The Erymanthian boar was a massive wild pig that lived on Mount Erymanthos and had been terrorizing the surrounding countryside with the enthusiasm of a natural disaster. This wasn't your typical farm pig that rolls around in mud and eats scraps. The Erymanthian boar was the size of a small building, with tusks that could gore through armor and a temper that made hurricanes look calm. Local farmers probably had nightmares about bacon fighting back. Hercules' strategy involved chasing the boar up the mountainside during winter when deep snow would slow the massive creature down. It was basically an ancient version of using environmental advantages in a boss fight. The hero drove the beast higher and higher until it became trapped in snowdrifts. Once the boar was stuck, Hercules managed to capture it alive using chains and nets. The plan worked so well that he decided to bring his prize directly to King Eurystheus as proof of his success. This seemed like a reasonable idea until he actually arrived at the palace. When Eurystheus saw Hercules approaching with a live, angry boar the size of a food truck, the cowardly king panicked so hard he hid in a bronze jar. From that day forward, Eurystheus would only communicate with Hercules through messengers, preferring to stay safely hidden in his palace. Sometimes the best way to handle bullies is to show them exactly what you're capable of. The Augean Stables, the ultimate power wash. The fifth labor was less about fighting monsters and more about dealing with the aftermath of divine-level procrastination. King Augeas owned the largest herds of cattle in the ancient world. We're talking about thousands of animals. The problem was that nobody had cleaned the stables in 30 years. The resulting mess was so epic, it probably violated several laws of physics. The stables were basically a mountain of manure that had achieved its own ecosystem. The smell alone could knock birds out of the sky, and the filth had piled up so high it threatened to engulf nearby villages. This was less a cleaning job and more an environmental disaster that needed a superhero intervention. King Eurystheus probably thought he was being clever, assigning Hercules a task that was impossible to complete in a single day. After all, how do you clean decades of accumulated waste in 24 hours? The king was likely imagining Hercules knee-deep in cow manure, slowly going insane with a shovel in his hands. But Hercules had learned to think strategically by now. Instead of tackling the job one stall at a time, he identified two nearby rivers, the Alpheus and the Peneus. With some creative engineering, he diverted both rivers directly through the stables, creating a massive natural pressure washer. The rushing water swept away 30 years of accumulated filth in a matter of hours, leaving the stables spotless and probably smelling better than they ever had. Hercules essentially invented power washing and river engineering in one brilliant stroke. Modern cleanup crews still use similar principles when dealing with large-scale environmental disasters, proving that sometimes the best solutions are the simplest ones. The Stymphalian birds, the Metal Death Squad. The sixth labor introduced Hercules to enemies that solved the age-old question, what if birds were absolutely terrifying? The Stymphalian birds were not your garden-variety feathered friends. These creatures had bronze beaks sharp enough to pierce armor, metallic feathers they could shoot like arrows, and an appetite for human flesh that made them the ancient world's most dangerous air force. These killer birds had taken over Lake Stymphalos, turning a peaceful body of water into a no-fly zone for anything that wanted to keep breathing. They attacked in flocks, raining down metal feathers like a deadly storm and picking off travelers with surgical precision. Local tourism probably took a serious hit. The birds were too numerous to fight individually, and their aerial advantage made them nearly impossible to reach. Hercules needed a strategy that could deal with multiple airborne targets at once. Hand-to-hand combat was clearly off the table when your opponents could literally fly circles around you. Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, decided to lend a helping hand by providing Hercules with bronze castanets made by the divine craftsman Hephaestus. These weren't ordinary musical instruments. They produced sounds so loud and disturbing that they could drive creatures insane with fear. Hercules climbed a nearby mountain and began playing the castanets with all his might. The horrible noise sent the Stymphalian birds into a panic, causing them to flee the area permanently. As they took flight, he managed to shoot down several with his arrows, proving that sometimes the best weapon against flying enemies is really good crowd control. This labor basically established Hercules as the ancient world's first noise pollution specialist. The Cretan Bull, the Divine Revenge. The seventh labor took Hercules to the island of Crete to deal with a bull that had serious anger management issues. This wasn't just any ordinary bull. The Cretan bull was either the same one that had carried Europa to Crete or the father of the infamous Minotaur, depending on which version of the story you prefer. Either way, it had impeccable mythological credentials and a really bad attitude. King Minos had originally received this magnificent bull from Poseidon, god of the sea, with the understanding that he would sacrifice it as an offering. But Minos liked the bull so much he decided to keep it and sacrifice a different animal instead. Poseidon took this breach of contract about as well as you'd expect from a temperamental sea god. As punishment for Minos' deception, Poseidon drove the bull completely mad. The creature began rampaging across Crete, destroying crops, demolishing buildings, and generally making life impossible for everyone on the island. It was like having a natural disaster with horns that never took a day off. Hercules approached this challenge with his trademark combination of courage and practical problem-solving. He wrestled the massive bull barehanded, demonstrating the kind of grip strength that would make modern arm wrestlers weep with envy. The struggle was epic, but Hercules eventually managed to subdue the beast without killing it. After capturing the bull, Hercules rode it across the sea back to mainland Greece, which must have been quite a sight for any sailors who happened to be passing by. King Eurystheus took one look at the still angry bull and immediately told Hercules to let it go, apparently having learned his lesson about accepting dangerous live animals as gifts. The bull wandered off to Marathon, where it continued causing trouble until another hero eventually dealt with it. The mares of Diomedes, the cannibal horses. The eighth labor introduced Hercules to horses that had developed a taste for something decidedly not found in typical horse feed. King Diomedes of Thrace owned 4 mares, Podargos, Lampon, Xanthos, and Dinos, that he had trained to eat human flesh. These weren't your gentle riding horses. They were basically equine velociraptors with a serious dietary problem. Diomedes was the kind of ruler who gave tyranny a bad name. He would feed captured travelers and enemies to his horses as both entertainment and a convenient disposal method. The mares had grown so accustomed to their carnivorous diet that they had become completely wild and uncontrollable, requiring chains and iron stalls to contain them. Hercules initially tried the direct approach, attempting to steal the horses while Diomedes was distracted. However, the king discovered the theft and pursued Hercules with a small army. This led to a battle where Hercules had to fight off soldiers while simultaneously trying to control 4 man-eating horses, which was roughly as difficult as it sounds. During the chaos of battle, Hercules made a strategic decision that solved multiple problems at once. He fed King Diomedes to his own horses, giving them a taste of their master while proving that poetic justice sometimes comes with hooves. The irony was so perfect it practically wrote itself. After consuming their former master, the mares mysteriously calmed down and became manageable normal horses again. It was as if eating Diomedes had somehow satisfied their bloodthirst and returned them to regular equine behavior. Hercules was able to lead them peacefully back to King Eurystheus, who probably made a mental note to never again request live animals as proof of completed labors. The girdle of Hippolyta, the fashion war. The 9th labor was requested not by King Eurystheus himself, but by his daughter Admete, who had developed a serious case of ancient fashion envy. She desperately wanted the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons, which was a belt given to the Amazon queen by Ares, god of war. This accessory wasn't just fashionable. It symbolized divine authority and military power. The Amazons were a legendary tribe of warrior women who lived without men and spent their time perfecting the arts of combat, archery, and horseback riding. They were basically the ancient world's most elite military unit, except they also had excellent taste in armor design. Getting anything from them usually required either exceptional diplomacy or exceptional fighting skills. Hercules assembled a crew of heroes for this mission, because even he recognized that walking into Amazon territory alone might be pushing his luck. The expedition included famous names like Theseus and other legendary warriors, turning the journey into something like an ancient version of Ocean's 11, except with more swords and fewer casinos. Surprisingly, when Hercules arrived and explained his mission, Queen Hippolyta was actually willing to give him the girdle peacefully. She was impressed by his reputation and saw no reason to fight over a belt when diplomacy could work just as well. For a moment, it looked like this might be Hercules' easiest labor yet. However, Hera couldn't resist stirring up trouble, as was her specialty when it came to anything involving her stepson. She disguised herself as an Amazon warrior and spread rumors that Hercules was planning to kidnap their queen. This triggered a massive battle where Hercules, thinking Hippolyta had betrayed him, killed the Amazon queen and took the girdle from her body. It's a perfect example of how miscommunication can turn a peaceful diplomatic mission into a tragic disaster that nobody wanted. The cattle of Geryon, the triple-bodied giant. The 10th labor sent Hercules on what was essentially a cross-continental cattle drive, except the cows belonged to a 3-bodied giant who really didn't appreciate rustlers. Geryon lived on the island of Erythea, somewhere beyond the western edge of the Mediterranean, and owned a herd of beautiful red cattle guarded by a 2-headed dog named Orthrus and a giant herdsman named Eurytion. Geryon wasn't just big, he was big in triplicate. The giant had 3 separate torsos, each with its own arms and head, all connected at the waist. Imagine trying to arm wrestle someone who could literally bring 3 times the usual number of arms to the fight. This anatomical arrangement made him one of the most formidable opponents Hercules would face. The journey to Erythea was an adventure in itself. Hercules had to travel to the very edge of the known world, where he erected 2 massive pillars, the famous Pillars of Hercules, to mark the boundary between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic Ocean. These landmarks, known today as the Rock of Gibraltar and the Mountains of Morocco, still bear his name. When Hercules finally reached the island, he dealt with the guardian dog Orthrus and the herdsman Eurytion with his typical efficiency. But Geryon himself presented a unique challenge. The 3-bodied giant could attack from multiple angles simultaneously, making him like fighting 3 opponents who shared the same pair of legs. Hercules solved this problem with a single arrow dipped in Hydra poison, which pierced through all 3 of Geryon's bodies at once. It was a perfect shot that eliminated the threat instantly, proving that sometimes quality marksmanship beats quantity of opponents. The cattle drive back to Greece took months and involved numerous additional adventures, but Hercules eventually delivered the entire herd to King Eurystheus, who probably wondered where he was going to keep all those cows. The apples of the Hesperides, the sky-switching trick. The 11th labor required Hercules to obtain golden apples from a garden located literally at the end of the world. The garden of the Hesperides was tended by nymphs called the Hesperides, who were daughters of the Titan Atlas. These weren't ordinary apples. They were wedding gifts from Gaia to Hera, granted immortality to anyone who ate them, and were guarded by Ladon, a 100-headed dragon that never slept. The biggest challenge wasn't even fighting the dragon, it was finding the garden in the first place. The location was such a closely guarded secret that even the gods weren't entirely sure where it was. Hercules had to embark on an epic quest for information, consulting various divine sources and following leads across the ancient world. During his search, Hercules encountered Prometheus, the Titan who had stolen fire for humanity and was being punished by having an eagle eat his liver every day for eternity. Hercules killed the eagle and freed Prometheus, who gratefully provided directions to the garden. It was the kind of good deed that proved heroes could multitask even during their most challenging missions. When Hercules finally located Atlas, who was holding up the sky as punishment for his role in the war against Zeus, he struck a deal. Atlas would retrieve the apples while Hercules temporarily took over sky-holding duties. This seemed like a reasonable division of labor, since Atlas was the only one who could safely enter the garden. The plan worked perfectly until Atlas returned with the apples and realized he quite enjoyed not having the weight of the heavens on his shoulders. He offered to deliver the apples to King Eurystheus himself, clearly planning to leave Hercules as a permanent sky holder, but Hercules outsmarted the Titan by asking him to briefly take back the sky so he could adjust his cloak for comfort. The moment Atlas resumed his burden, Hercules grabbed the apples and left, proving that sometimes the best strategy is letting your opponent think they're the clever one. Cerberus, the ultimate hellhound. The final labor was arguably the most dangerous, capturing Cerberus, the three-headed dog that guarded the entrance to the underworld. This wasn't just any supernatural pet. Cerberus was the ultimate security system, designed to prevent the dead from escaping and the living from entering without permission. The dog had 3 heads for maximum vigilance, a serpent's tail for extra menace, and the kind of bite that could literally drag souls into eternal damnation. Hercules couldn't just walk into the underworld like he was visiting a neighbor. He first had to be initiated into the Eleusinian mysteries, ancient religious rites that prepared mortals for contact with the realm of the dead. Think of it as getting the proper cosmic clearance before attempting the most dangerous home invasion in mythological history. When Hercules finally descended into the underworld, he encountered Hades, king of the dead, and made his request in person. Surprisingly, Hades agreed to let him borrow Cerberus, but with one important condition. Hercules had to subdue the monster using only his bare hands, without weapons or tools of any kind. This restriction turned the fight into the ultimate wrestling match between a hero and a 3-headed hellhound. Hercules had to grab Cerberus around the necks and squeeze until the great dog submitted, all while avoiding the venomous serpent tail and trying not to get bitten by any of the 3 sets of fangs. It was like the world's most dangerous version of pin the tail on the donkey. After successfully capturing Cerberus, Hercules brought the 3-headed dog to King Eurystheus as proof of completing all 12 labors. The sight of an actual hellhound in his throne room so terrified the king that he immediately declared all of Hercules' tasks complete and begged him to return the monster to where it belonged. Modern pet owners dealing with difficult dogs should count themselves lucky they only have to worry about chewed furniture and not the security of the afterlife. Liked it? Give us a thumbs up and subscribe. We've got plenty more exciting stories coming your way.